In this video, you will learn some important concepts of frame of motion by building this complex scroll animation UI. Frame of motion is an animation library for React. It was created by the creators of a professional prototyping tool for designers called Framer. The library is designed to make it easy for developers to implement the latest demanding animation UIs. Now, it's quite easy to get started off with. After you've installed it, then you can just specify some settings for an element that you want to animate, like we're seeing here. So all that needs to be done is add a prefix called motion dot in front of, say, a div or a span or a paragraph. It doesn't matter. You can add it to any element, and then you get these ability to animate it. So here I've got an animate property here, and I've got an x value, y value, a scale, and rotate. So usually, you know, animation is from a particular state to another state. So, you know, the x value is always starts off with 0 and ends with you know, whatever animation state you want to start off with. So so you can set it to 70. So we'll start from 0 and it will go to 70. And the same as the y. You can have like a minus and negative and positive numbers. So this just shows you how less code you need to write when you're using frame of motion. So if I go to a next example, it's a bit more complex. So this is sort of this can be a CSS grid layout of some card panels, and if you click on it, you know, it turns into a model and it enlarges, and the background sort of grays out. Okay, so and the code structure here is, you can see that, you know, you're writing less code for a complex thing. So I mean, this is a bit more complex. You know, there's more things to this. You know, you need to structure your CSS and things like that in the right way. But as you can see, you know, the code is quite easy to read, and is less complex. So if I go down the page, I can show you some of the building blocks that you would use to construct animation in Framer. So, you know, your basic animation, I've covered it earlier, but in more detail, you know, you'll have an initial property, and then you have an animate property, and you'll have a transition property. Now the initial state is, you know, well, where do you want to start from? Then the animate will be the ending animation state. So here we're scaling it from 0 to 1, and then we're rotating it at the same time, and it's giving it sort of a springy effect. Now you can also add in delays and, you know, timing settings here as well. Okay, so that's what the transition's for. So if I click on that, if I play that, okay, it rotates and it enlarges, and that's what it's doing. That's the basic animation. For more complex animation, you can use keyframes similar to CSS keyframes. Instead of having one value for the property you want to animate, you will set the value as an array of values. As you can see in this example, scale has an array of 5 values, and same as rotate and border radius. So the rule is sort of, you know, have all of them with the same number of keyframes, then it will animate nicely. So Framer will iterate through them, then animate, as you're seeing in this example. Now, you know, when you animate more and more things, and, you know, these things will get complicated, and then you would use something called variants. Basically, you're abstracting out into object, and then you're applying it to the individual elements. So this will make your code more readable. So that's what's happening there. Then you got things like gestures, which is sort of, you know, event handlers that you can use for hover, and there's many more. This is just one example, but, you know, there's more event handlers that you know, you can apply animations to. So here you're saying on hover, scale 1.2 and rotate, and it's also got on while on tap. So when you tap it, it does a different animation. So you're setting 2 animation settings there. Okay, so one on while hover and one on tap. So if I hover over, it sort of rotates, and if I click on it, it sort of turns into a circle. So that's sort of that's the gestures. So there's many more gestures, and you can make the things draggable. So if I look at the code for the drag, you know, you have a wrapper with this reference and constraint ref there, and then then within that you got a child that you can set as draggable. So you just set it as the property as drag, and drag constraints will be the parent. Okay, that's what's happening here. Okay, so it's very easy to understand the code for these things, and also you got the scroll animation, like applying if you want to apply a parallax effect to it, and this is the code for that. So you can also animate the path, SVG path. So if I play this animation here, it draws the icon out, and if I look at the code, you can see that we've got an SVG element there. We've got a path with the motion prefix. So we're applying the animation to that, and we're using a variant here. So this is a good example of variant. So we're saying use the variant icon, which is this object here, and this will contain our animation settings. And for the initial animation setting, we're going to refer to the hidden value, which is this. And for the animate settings, we're going to refer to the visible of this icon variant. So that's a good example of using variant, because if you attach these settings to the actual path, it'll be unreadable. So that's how you use variants, and this is and you can do path animation like this. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to apply complex animation to these set of cards. Now, if I scroll through these cards, you see that animation will kick in when it comes into view. Now, each card has an image, heading, and some text. Now, these are animated in one after the other with a small delay. So there's two things here where we've got animation on scroll and staggered animation. In this video, I'm going to cover basic concepts of a frame of motion. I'm going to show you how to use variants to abstract out animation properties and settings, because when you're dealing with multiple child elements and applying animation based on different event listeners, your code can get complex. So variants is a good way to make your code less complex, more manageable, and helps you keep your code clean. And I will also show you how to apply staggered animation effect using staggerChildren setting, and also finally how to animate elements when they come into view using whileInView event listener. So if you like tutorials like this, please subscribe to my channel, and I'm in VS Code, and I've already got some starter files set up already. I've used the Create React app to set up the demo. As you can see here, I've cleaned up most of the unwanted files, and I've just got the basic sort of app.js, app CSS, index CSS, index.js, and I've got an extra file called block list. So this is a list of blog posts that we're going to be rendering. So going back to the app.js, I've got so in the app.js, at the top I'm importing the app.css. The app.css has a sort of a simple styling for it's basically a set of cards, and it's got a card wrapper and a card styling, and some image container, and styling for header and p tag. Okay, it's quite a simple styling style sheet. And if I go back to the app.js, at the top I'm importing the app.css, and I also importing the block list, which is block list from the block list.js file there. Okay, and then I'm also importing these components from frame of motion. So you need to install frame of motion. So if you go to new terminal and just do npm install framer, it's framer-motion. Okay, I've already run this, so you need to run this. Okay, so that's what I'm importing there. Put in there. Okay, so then in the main app function, now if we look at the main app function, you can see that we're iterating through the block list, and for each block item in the block list, we're rendering a card. So that's what the card component is doing, which is here. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a card wrapper for the styling, and then we got the card item there. Okay, so if I go back to the block list, so the block list JS file contains our data. So it's just an array of objects, and each object has an image, a H2, and a P1. So it renders the image and a title and some sort of short text. Okay, and we've got about 10, 11 items in there. So in the app function, it iterates through, maps through, and then it renders it out. And as you can see, the card component, it renders out each item. Okay, so, and that's the styling. So if I go to the browser, and that's what it looks like. So go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got 8 items in there. Okay, so that's what it's rendering there. Okay, so we got the image as an emoji. So it's not a real image. So we're just mimicking an image there. So if I could just go back to the browser again and do an inspect, and you can see the sort of structure of our the HTML. So go root, and then each item has got a card wrapper, and each card wrapper has a card, and within inside the card we've got an image, and we've got H2 and a P1, and that's the structure of our app. And as you can see, the card wrapper has a minimum height 100V, and that's why, it sort of gives you a sort of basic responsiveness to it. And it's a flex item centered, and that's the styling behind it. And the card item is, it's just some basic styling there. The image container has it has a flex layout so that it centers the emoji, and it's got some background image, gradient image there. That's the styling for it. Okay, so to add animation to our demo, what we need to do is prefix the element that we want to animate with a motion. So remember, at the top we imported the components motion and variance from frame of motion, so we're going to use motion here. So I'm going to target this image container. So at the beginning, I'm just going to add motion dot in front of the div, and for the end tag as well, motion dot. Okay, now we have, oops, I left the n out there, motion dot. Okay, so now we can add animation properties to this element. So to do that, we just, on the starting tag, there are 3 properties that are basic that you can use. The first one is initial, okay, which is equal to a it's going to be open close curly brackets, and it's going to have a double open close curly brackets. Okay, and the value is going to be like say if you want the x value to be 0, or then the initial x value of the element is going to be 0. Okay, so that's the default anyway. Okay, so and then the next property is animate. Okay, which is equal to, it's also double curly brackets, and in animate you can say I want to move the x position to 100. Okay, now let's just see what happens now. If I go to the browser and I do a refresh, see, it moves it to the right. It animates it to the right. Okay, so that's what it's doing here. So usually initial, if I say minus 100 and say 0, that should put it back to the natural position. So if I do a refresh, it moves from the left to the natural position. See that? Okay, so that's how you animate the x position. So you got the initial value. Now if you don't include the initial value, it will pick up the initial value from the CSS. So you give the initial position to say where you want to move it from, and the ending position is 0 for x and y. It'll be the same for y as well. Okay, so Now if I want to rotate it, I can just add it in the animation object. I can just do, after the X value, I can just do a comma and say rotate and colon 360. Okay, so if I save that and go to the browser, if I do refresh, so it moves in and then rotates. Because it's quite quick, we don't see the movement. So so there is another property that you can put to make it, to slow it down and speed it up, and you can give it other effects as well. The transition property allows you to put in delays and different types of animation as well. So to add transition, it's double curly brackets, and you can put in like a delay of say 2 seconds. If I say that, save that and go to browser. Now after 2 seconds it's going to animate. So it starts from the left position and then it rotates and moves to the right position. So the transition slows it down. Well, it sort of delays it, and then you can see that it starts from left position and rotates to X position. Okay, so you can also have duration, which is the length of the animation. So this will run slower now. So if I go back, and the actual animation will run slower. It's not a delay. It's just running slower. So if I do a refresh again, so it slowly rotates. So there's a sort of different effects that you can have. Now transition, you can also apply what do you call a spring effects. So which is, you say, say type, you give it a type called spring. Okay, quotes spring. Okay, and then you can give it a bounce effect. Spring animation allows you to give it sort of a bouncy and springy type animation. So it's sort of it gives you a little bit of a wow factor to it and a realism to it. So and I can say bounce, give it a bounce amount of 0.8 or something like that. And let's just see what happens. See, it gives it sort of it rotates and it sort of springs back. And if you increase that to bounce to say 1.5, it's just gonna give it a very bouncy, springy effect. There you go. Okay, so usually if you put it to 0.4 or something, that should be sort of fairly good. There you go. So that's the three properties that you can play around with, and to make your animations look very effective. You can also do more advanced animation like keyframe animation. So I can just show you in the browser. So say if I wanted to rotate this from 0 to 60%, then back to 0 again, then the way I would do that is I'll step through a series of values for the rotate. So to add that, you have an array of numbers. So I'll put square brackets, and I'll say I want to start from 0, comma, I'll say 45, then or 90, then comma 0. So it's going to go from 0 to 90, then 0 again. So if I save that and then just refresh, so there you go. So it goes from 0, 90, then rotates back. Now you can say you want to rotate back to say minus 90. If I say that, there you go. So it sort of rotates back to 90. So you can have like different values. You can have another to 90 again. So it's sort of, and you can put 0, so it's better. There you go. Okay, so it does a little sort of a shake thing. So you can slow it down and see it better. So if I put a duration of 3 seconds, that's going to run it in slow motion now. There you go. So it's running through these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. So that's what it's doing. Okay, so that's how you do keyframe animation. Now, one thing about adding a more complex animation is that the code becomes hard to read. As you can see, you know, all these properties are becoming very sort of difficult to know, you know, what's happening. So if you add more and more animation to all the other elements, you know, it becomes harder. So in Framer, there is a solution to this. You can abstract out all these settings into another object. So to do that, we use something called variant property. So variant, so this is how you do it. So variance equals, and open close curly brackets, and you give it a name. Say, so I'm going to say image animate. Okay, and so now I'm going to create an object constant at the top. I say constant image animate is equal to, it's an object. Okay, now within this object we're going to give labels for the different states. So the states are the initial state and animate state. Now the transition will actually go into the animate state. So we're going to have 2 key values in our object. And we can give it a different label. So initial, we call it, we're going to say off screen, okay, and that's going to be an object. And then we're also going to have on screen, okay. Now you can give it any value that you want. You can call it initial and animate to, or something like that. But as we're gonna do on scroll animation later, so I'm just gonna name it like this for the time being. Okay, so we got the names. Okay, now for the off screen, we're gonna put the initial settings. So I just copy that, and so I just copy these settings, X. Copy and just put it in there. Okay, and then for the on screen, so I'm going to copy all this settings. I'm not copying the curly brackets, so just going to put it in there. Okay, so I don't want the curly brackets, sorry. Okay, so oops, that's the curly bracket, right? That's for that. Okay, so I got X value and rotate. So I've got on screen, off screen, and on screen. Now for the transition, I'm gonna put, so I'm gonna have a value there called transition, and then I'm gonna have an object, and then I'm gonna put all these settings in there. Okay, so I don't need that semicolon. Okay, so I just moved all these settings into that that object, and I called it image animate, and I've got that name there as well. Okay, so that's the same name. Okay, so now I can delete all this, so I don't need the transition. Now I don't need, I can delete that, and I can delete that. Now I'm gonna, for the initial state here, I can just refer to off screen, that's that name there. So that's going to be the initial state, and then to animate we use in the on screen, so I just refer to on screen. So this is going to be inverted commas, sorry. So this is inverted commas, and this is inverted commas. So you refer to the name with off screen, and inverted commas. So that was the problem. Okay, so now our animation runs as before. There you go. So just to recap what I've done, what we've done here is we've introduced a variant, which is an object that will contain our settings for our initial state and animate state. So we're given these label names, off screen and on screen. So in our image animate object, as you see at the top, we've got an off screen and on screen. So that's how we've abstracted it out. And when you're referring to the initial state in the property, you got to put inverted commas. Before we were putting animate properties with objects curly brackets. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. Okay, so next we're gonna add animation to the heading. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm just gonna do motion dot and then prefix the ending tag with motion dot. Okay, and then we're gonna, for the starting tag, we're gonna add a protocol variant, and then it's gonna equal to, we're gonna call it text animate. Okay, so now we have to create a text animate object. So we're just going to copy this, the image animate. We're just going to rename it, and then so we're going to rename it to text. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to the heading. Okay, so we're going to put some space there. Okay, and we're gonna have initial state equals to, and we're gonna say, well, it's gonna be the same as this off screen. Well, I can just copy this. We're gonna use the same setting. So we're gonna use this variant, and for the initial state is gonna be off screen. And for animation state, we're going to use on screen. So we got the text animate there now, and we got the off screen and on screen. So this if I save this and do a refresh, so it's running the same animation. Okay, so I'll run again. Okay, so now I can make this different. So I'll say change that to a Y, so that it's moving in a different direction, so we know. So if I do refresh, okay, so I'm not going to have the rotate for this. Okay, I'm going to remove the rotate and save that, refresh. So it's moving up from an up position going down. So we want to make it go from a bottom position going up. So we just say off screen, let's say 100, and on screen Y. So this is, now it's gonna move from a down position up. Okay, so, and we can also add an opacity here. So it's just gonna say comma opacity of 0, and then we're gonna have, and we're gonna show it in there you go. So okay, so I can do the same for the P tag as well. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to add prepend it with motion dot, and then for the end tag as well, motion dot. Okay, then I'm going to add some animation properties. So I'm going to basically copy that and just paste it in there. Okay, so I'm using the same settings. So if I save this, so I'm using the same variant. So it's text animate. So it's going to run the same animation for that as well. So if I run, there you go. So it all sort of runs at the same time. Now, because the animation runs all at the same time, it's pretty basic. Now there is a more advanced animation technique called staggered animation, where the animation elements run with a sort of a small delay. Say, the first animation will run, and then the second animation will run sort of half a second later. The third animation will run, 1 second later, and then the third one will be 1.5 seconds later. So it gives a bit of a sort of a feeling to the animation. Now, to add a staggered animation in Framer, what you need to do is we need to go to the card component, and then we need to apply the staggered animation to the parent container or element. Okay, in our case, this is card container. Okay, so all the elements that we're animating are children of the card. Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to first prefix the div with a motion, then also the end tag for that as well, motion dot. Okay, so then in the starting tag, we're going to add a transition equals to, and it's double curly brackets, and it's going to be staggered children, and the setting is going to be 0.5. Okay, that's the first step. Now, what we also need to do is we need to abstract out these initial and animate state properties. Okay, so and then we need to sort of pass it down from the parent element. So what we can do is we can just copy that and paste it in there. So we got initial and animate state there. Okay, so and we can delete it from here. So this makes the code much cleaner as well. Okay, and we delete it from the H2 and delete it from there as well. Okay, so let's clean the code up a bit. Okay, so let's put some space there. Okay, so now what we can do is if I save this and refresh, there you go. So there's a delay in the animation now. All three of them sort of has a sort of a slight delay. Now, if I just be aware that if you leave the settings in there, the initial state, it won't. I'll do refresh now, and I think I need to leave it there as well. If I leave it there, see, it all runs at the same time. So you need to remove it, abstract it out. So just remove that. Okay, so save that and just make sure it's running. Okay, so you abstract out the initial and animate properties, so that then it propagates to the children, and then you add a transition to the parent, and the transition has a stagger children setting, and we've set it to 0.5. So that's it working. Now we've got staggered animation working now for all the cards, but we can't actually see the animation on the other cards unless you scroll down very quickly, and you can see it. But it will run once and then it will stop. Okay, so the next challenge is we need to activate the animation when we scroll. So when the next card comes in, we need to activate it, and then the next card when it comes into view as we are scrolling. So we need to activate it on scroll. Okay, currently the animate property works on refresh. So when you refresh it and it loads the view, so when the view gets mounted, it runs the animation. So it will only run it on that on the mounting event. So animate is a sort of a event listener looking at the mounting of the view. Okay, so now if we want to animate it on scroll, and when it comes into view, then we have to use a different event listener. To activate animation when the card comes into view, we need to do two things. Now, in frame of motion, there is an event listener called whileInView. Now, what this does is it will check if the current element has come into the viewport of the browser. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to change the animate to whileInView. Okay, so it's a while with capital I and capital V. Okay, and that will activate the the animation when it comes into view. Okay, as you can see here. Now the problem with this is it will activate the animation as soon as the top edge comes into view, as you see here. So if we want to activate it when after 100% has passed, then we need to add an additional setting, and the additional setting is a viewport, and a viewport equals, and it's going to be open close curly brackets, and within there it's going to be a double open close curly bracket, sorry, and within there we're going to have a property called once. Okay, and we set it to true or false. So we set it to false. Now what this setting is for is, do you want to play this only once, or do you want it repetitively played? So if it goes off screen and comes back in screen again, do you want to play as well? So we keep it as play once false, which means it will play back multiple times. Okay, then then there's another setting as called amount. Okay, and this is a number between 0 and 1. So it'll be like so if I say 1, that means the amount of the card that needs to pass before for the animation to be activated. So if I put it to 1, then the whole card needs to come into view. And if I say 0.1, then only like a small fraction of the card needs to be come into view. So if I save this and I set it to amount 0.1, if I refresh, the animation runs on the first one. If I scroll down on the second one, as it comes into view, the top edge passes, the animation gets activated. Now if I change that number to 1, which means it's 100%, and I do a refresh. Okay, now if I slowly scroll, that the animation is not activated. Now it gets activated. Okay, and on the second one, it gets activated now. Okay, so the whole card is passing, and then it gets activated. So I need to just change that initial opacity to 0 for the image. So okay, it's the opacity for the off screen for the image that we need to change. So change it to opacity, and we're going to give it 0. And then we're going to add opacity there as well. Let me just give some space there. So just opacity to 1. Okay, so in the comma there. Okay, so there you go. Okay, so the whole card has to pass through, and then the animation gets activated. So you can play with that number. We'll go back. So I've got the amount as 1, so you can put it to 0.5. It might be better depending on look and feel of the animation. So this sort of looks good. Okay, so and I can just change that rotation. It's not we just change it to, so remember we had rotation with keyframes, so I just put it to say 10, so it does a little kickback. So if I do a refresh, okay, and change the duration to 1, duration to 1, it runs faster. So it's got a better effect now. Okay, so you can play around with these numbers to make it aesthetically beautiful. There you go. All right, so if I go back, so go back. So so in the viewport, so these are the two things that you need if you want to activate it, you know, when it comes into the viewport. So whileInView, so you just replace the animate to whileInView. So this is sort of a event listener, and then in the viewport you set the settings. And now I've set once to false. And if I set it to true, remember when if I sort of scroll this card out and back in again, it runs that animation again. So if I set it to true, it will only run it once. So I'll do a refresh. So it runs it. Then if I go out, come back in, it doesn't run it. Okay, so this one hasn't been run. So if I go back and come back, so these ones have already been run. So the ones that haven't been run, it will run once, then it won't run again. So depending on your preference, you know, you can play around with this and make it look better. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and please subscribe to my channel and join me in the next video.